Good afternoon. Thank you for taking the time to join us for today's Policy Matter Roundtable. My name is Wilmarie Newton, and I will be moderating this meeting. In order to avoid background noise, I ask that you please mute yourself if you're not speaking. However, you can unmute yourself if you'd like to ask a question, or you can type it into the chat box. If you have webcams, we welcome you to turn them on so we can make this more interactive. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and will be archived on CABE's website under Services. And now I'd like to introduce Jody Goler, Senior Staff Associate for Policy Services at CABE.
Hello, everyone. I hope you're enjoying this beautiful sunny day and this string of sunny days we've had in Connecticut. Not a lot of laughs when I talk about the weather lately. It's been pretty miserable. So today, thank you for being here. And just for today, we wanted to take the hour or as much time as we need to review policies that appeared in the December update. Look forward to the next update, which will be arriving in February, toward the end of February. Also, look at what's in progress or what's in process right now, and also anticipate what may be ahead with the legislature. So again, what I like to do is, it is a roundtable, so I certainly invite anyone at any point to ask any questions or to ask for clarification if something doesn't make sense or we need to talk about something more. So first part of this will be my presentation, but feel free at any point to stop me in my tracks. All right. There we go. So I'm going to go through some of these rather quickly because I think people know about this, and we've been talking a lot about this over the past several months. But as you're aware, the Connecticut School Climate Policy is new. It was the legislature required in the 2023 session required CABE to draft a new school climate policy based on this criteria, and the Commission on Women, Children, Seniors, Equity, and Opportunity had to approve the policy, our policy, and they did so, and it's all set to go. It's in our bank, and several districts have been asking for it, so we're good with that. And it was developed to provide districts guidance on recent revisions to Connecticut school climate law. So I think key pieces here is that your boards of ed may adopt it in originally it was 2023 or 2024, but it needs to adopt it by July 2025. You don't have to wait until that date, but you could do it sooner than that. I did also want, and I will mention this as we go along, that one of the key pieces to so we have the school climate policy, and this commission wanted to create a uniform complaint form, and they have done so. So that is also available behind our Connecticut school climate policy. So if you look up our policy, you'll find behind it the actual reporting form. And I'll talk a little bit about that as we go along. So additional, I think the key pieces for me regarding the school climate policy is that it's different than the bullying law that you may be used to, which was all about investigations. It was reacting to issues reported as bullying, and we were investigating to see if it rose to the level of bullying. And then if it did so, there would be several things that districts would have to do to comply with the policy. This new Connecticut school climate policy is designed to be proactive, is designed to provide a framework for districts to create positive school climate, positive sustained school climate. And this is actually modeled after some districts in our state that have done a great job with this, and using some of the definitions, the roles, the school climate specialist, the school climate committee, the school climate survey, the school climate plan, taking all these various components and putting it together to ensure that schools improve their school climate so there are fewer instances or incidences of bullying, and children are well served and feel safe to learn. Teachers feel safe to teach. So it's really a transformative um, mind shift in terms of how we look at school climate. And one of the big issues with the development of the change of the challenging behavior reporting form, in my view, was I didn't want to see a form that was going to become mandated in schools, that was going to interfere, that was going to basically take a policy that's supposed to be proactive and again turn it back into an investigative um, reactive policy, which we'll talk about as we get to that form. Again, the key components continuing, I think there needs to be an emphasis on training, which commences July 1st, 2024. It's important that boards that they're required to provide resources and training to school employees and areas around social emotional learning, school climate and culture, evidence and research-based, restorative practices. And I want you to be aware that I'm in the process of updating CABE's restorative practices policy so that it works in conjunction with the school climate policy. And the restorative practices policy will become a mandated policy that you'll need to adopt. The Connecticut school climate standards are within the school climate policy as well. And again, the challenging behavior reporting form is part of the policy, it's after the policy. And the one key piece I wanted to share with you is it's not required by law or policy. However, it serves as a model that boards may adopt this form. This form has been vetted by attorneys, it's been vetted by superintendents and school personnel. Again, because I didn't want there to become a form that would become so onerous and so cumbersome that it would put more burden on schools and boards, especially superintendents and principals, where it would fall square on their shoulders. So the fact that this is an optional form, it's designed to provide guidance to districts and to administrators specifically. I think it's a movement in the right direction. There are still some issues I have with it, but I think the fact that it's not required and districts can adopt it as it meets their needs, I think that works. The educator and evaluation and support plan. This is not a required policy for boards to have. However, if you already have a school, or if you already have an evaluation policy, you'd want to replace it with this, which is again a significant change from the past where the new guidelines removing the 4 performance evaluation designators for teachers and any reference to teacher evaluation scoring systems to determine those ratings. It's a whole different, again, I use the word mind shift. It's a mind shift, a significant mind shift from the previous educator evaluator plan. So this policy is really created around the guidelines that boards of education are going to have to follow in adopting their plans. So it's also designed to improve teaching and leadership. It's focusing on those key aspects to build trusted and constructive professional relationships between evaluators and evaluatees. It references state and national models to inform and support professional practice. The Professional Development Evaluation Committee, PDEC, is a very important committee in your school districts. And so let me just talk a little bit about this. The PDECs have been in place for several years. It's the Professional Development Evaluation Committee. And with this new plan and the guidelines and the policy that works in conjunction with that, it's your PDEC is going to be is going to have a critical role in your districts. They're going to base work on state and national standards and mutually agree upon standard-based best practices observation model. So they'll be creating the model, the observation model that under which teachers will be observed and then ultimately evaluated. The board is required to implement a plan based upon the guidelines on or before July 1st, 2024. The plan requires mutual agreement between the board and PDEC, and the policy includes guiding principles, vision, process, dispute resolution modeled from the guidelines. So I think it's really important that as you talk to your superintendents about the PDEC committee, that the people have been really who are on this committee have been chosen with consideration of they're your best educators, they're your best teachers, they are people who within the group itself can build trust and consensus, develop a plan that represents that follows these guidelines, but also is a committee that can work with the board to come up with a mutual agreement around their plan and the board's adoption of that plan, because both have to agree to the plan. And then there are steps. If there is an agreement, there are steps the board would need to follow to ultimately get agreement. But when you look at the actual policy, when you look at the guidelines, and if you have a good engaged PDEC committee and a superintendent who's monitoring and part of that process, I think you'll be in great shape, especially because the guidelines will ultimately determine whether or not the plan will be passed by the state or approved by the state. So you want to be a good question to ask your superintendent is who's on the PDEC committee? School resource officer. Again, the critical piece around here is the requirement now of an MOU. So CABE's policy is updated to address the new MOU requirements in the Public Act 23-167. The MOU further defines an investigation and behavioral intervention related to challenging behavior or conflict that escalates to violence or constitutes a crime. Overall, what the legislature was concerned about, and I think boards are concerned about, is that if a district has SROs, what is their role in a school, and how is that different than what the administrator's role is in a school? So you really want to, in my previous district, we talked a lot about creating a matrix that identified this is what administrators do, and this is what SROs do. And the MOU, the legislation provides specific guidelines for creating an MOU. And so here are some of those components. It must be maintained in a central location in the district and posted on the district website. It must include provisions addressing daily interactions between students and school personnel with school resource officers. So that gets into that, again, that matrix of how do administrators interact with students? How do SROs interact with students? How do guidance counselors interact with students? So looking at all the various roles and how they interact with students. Must include a graduated response model for student discipline. Must include language regarding required training, specifically SEL training and restorative practices training. Must include provisions specifying an SRO's duties and procedures for restraint, use of firearms, and school-based arrest. And that's where school-based arrest is where you get into issues around if a police officer needs to make an arrest in a school, does the arrest occur in the school? What process is in place to ensure that the student isn't even on his or her worst day isn't embarrassed and issues don't become worse? Do you take a student out of a class? You don't want an SRO to go into a classroom and pull a student out of the classroom and put handcuffs on a student. But you really need to spell that out in the MOU. Exit interviews. We've actually had a couple of questions around the exit interviews. So CABE updated the policy 4117.6, aligning with requirements in Public Act 23-159. And teachers leaving the profession and teacher attrition rates. So it requires boards to develop and conduct exit interviews, exit surveys of teachers voluntarily leaving employment with the board. So if there's a teacher who is terminated or there's some issues related to it, didn't make tenure or things like that, that's not required there. But if a teacher voluntarily leaves employment with the board, that person would need to be provided an exit survey. And also it requires that the board adds teacher attrition rates to their strategic school profile. So here are the key points with the exit interview, exit survey. And I have a copy here, which is part of our policy. It's in the appendix. So it must be in place no later than January 2024. Must be completed by a teacher employed by the board and voluntarily ceases employment. And it must include questions relating to the reason why the teacher left. If the teacher is leaving the profession, the demographics of the teacher, not the community. This is where we had some questions. It's the demographics related to the teacher and the subject area in which the teacher taught. What I tried to do in creating the survey is I tried to pepper these questions in with other questions, because what I didn't want the survey to become is an opportunity for the for a person leaving the district to take parting shots at the board, at the superintendent, at the principal. It should be a tool that really helps inform the board and the administration, and also provide information or data that will help the district retain teachers. So the kinds of questions I ask in the survey, again, this is the required questions are as noted, but I also included questions of what do you like about your position, work at, or your work? How did you get along with other people in your schools? What improvements would you make to make the school a better work environment and provide opportunities for additional comments? So I'm really trying to get in the survey, I'm trying to get deeper into why the teacher is leaving than just simply his or her demographic information and are they leaving the profession, and are they what subject did the person teach? So again, as long as you have those specific questions in your survey, there are other things you could ask as well to give you a more well-rounded view of the teacher, of why the teacher is leaving. Cheating and plagiarism, academic dishonesty, 5121.3. And again, what I try to do here is just create or update our policy to incorporate or to work along with the AI policy that we created as well. And I think the key piece here is the third bullet, which gets into, I think, with AI, students are going to really need to understand what is research and what are study skills to really understand how research works and what role AI has, and what kind of information, when you get information from AI, how do you cite that information? And so it's one level is just simply going over with students why we do research, the components of good research, the questions you ask along with doing research, and using AI as a tool, but also knowing when to cite your use of AI. And you see the fourth bullet gets into materials generated by AI was added to another person's original ideas work as material requiring annotation and citation. So looking at materials generated by AI along with the components around you citing other person's original ideas or work as material requiring annotation and citation. And then their administrative regulations have been updated as well to, again, update with the current AI policy. Graduation requirement, you are all familiar with the graduation requirement. And so again, just to note that CABE's policy is updated to comply with Public Act 23-21. And again, the key components around it, there are several components for purposes of this discussion. The board may adopt the requirement of a 1-credit mastery-based diploma assessment for students to graduate or be granted a diploma. It had been a requirement. So this is now you may adopt this or keep it, as it were. Commencing with the class of graduating in 2027, students must have earned a half credit in personal financial management and financial literacy. And this half credit course or credit can be applied to either humanities or as an elective. Construction of the agenda. So CABE again updated the bylaw 9323 by adding language aligned with the Public Act 23-160. And again, in addition to posting Board of Education meeting agendas on its website 24 hours prior to the meeting, any associated documents that may be reviewed by members of the board at such meeting will be made available on the board's website prior to the meeting. Pam and I did receive a question from a superintendent who had concerns about board materials that the community should not be privy to. And my comment back to this, or my points back to the superintendent, had to do with if these are materials that you're going to be using in an executive session, they do not need to be posted as materials for the board meeting, because in essence, you're going into executive session and you have reasons for going into executive session. Those materials that you're going to be reviewing in executive session should not be part of the materials that are posted on your website for the entire community to see. So a board that or superintendent that doesn't post those materials that will be reviewed in executive session, certainly doing the right thing.
Jody,
Yes,
did you see we do have a couple of questions in the chat? I'm not sure if you.
I don't see that. So
Okay, I can read them out.
sure.
So the first question was on whether policy is required versus optional for the exit interviews. Is it required or optional?
The exit interview survey is required.
Okay. And then
It's specifically required around those points that I made in that slide. So the exit interview has to include those key components that are identified in the legislation.
So
And
that's my question. And I know you had said something in a previous webinar that your definition or explanation on the policies might be a little different than what Vin Mistero did. So when I looked at the chart and it said exit interviews, is it required? No. That I interpret that as then there isn't anything that we have to change within the policy. That's but yet what you just said is you need to change this. This is required. So, and so that's causing some confusion.
yeah, no, thank you for raising that point. And just to be clear that there are things that the legislature passes that that do not require policy. So, for example, the legislature has said that every school board in the state of Connecticut must have a school climate policy. So every board manual must include that policy, and we provide the model for that policy. The exit interview, the legislation doesn't say that the Board of Education has to have a policy related to exit interviews. What it does say is boards have to have exit interviews, has to have an exit interview survey tool that asks these questions, but it doesn't require a policy. So, where I come down on that is if putting my superintendent hat on, if there are laws that are being passed by the legislature that my entire community would benefit from understanding and knowing about, and also would guide not only my administrators, but members of my entire staff to comply with, I would say that's cause for a policy. But for example, policies related to how money is handled from gate receipts and things like that. I have English teachers touching that money. I have science teachers touching that money at gate receipts. I want everyone to know what the process is for when the person gets the money and how it's counted. You having two people count it and going through that process and where it's stored, where it goes. That to me, even though it's not a required policy, I would say it would be good for a Board of Education to have that policy. But there are things like there are laws that my business manager has to follow that are specific to the business office that I would say, if he or she knows I wouldn't hire a business manager if he or she didn't have expertise in those specific aspects of the work. Maybe not all of the laws related to business management have to become policies because they're specifically for that department, and that person should be, I could hold that person accountable for knowing those laws. So in a case like this, Anne, I would say that this, I would have this as a policy, because you want all your principals to know, you want there to be one specific survey that people are given. It's one of those things that after the dust settles from the 2023 legislative session, this is something that can easily that can fall out of view in most districts without a policy, but it's not required as a policy. The survey is required, but it's not a policy that's required.
Yeah, that's
I have a
that's
question
really
about this.
confusing, because I was pulling up the policy that we have, which we had gotten from CABE on exit, the survey interviews. And if I look at this and it says, no, this is not required, then I'm thinking we shouldn't change anything in our policy. But we do need to change something because something is actually required now.
Right.
So
Yeah.
there's two different things. In other words, if you don't have any policy, then I guess you don't need one.
Well,
But if you have a policy, you better make sure that it's up to date with the
Right.
law. And right
That's-
now, this policy that we have is not up to date. So I would look at that as that's a required change. The law changed. You got to change something in your policy.
yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. And we try to hit that in my highlights. We try to hit that also in the quarterly updates as well that some districts subscribe to.
But what I'm suggesting is that is this language required? There is some required language that needs to go into our policy.
Well, if you have an exit interview policy, and it doesn't include the language that's here, you definitely need to update that policy. Yes.
Right.
But
Where you're saying there's really no change needed on your chart. That's the question. That's the part that's causing confusion.
Which chart?
On the update chart.
Oh, in the update chart.
Right.
Got it. Got it.
I have a question about the same policy. The legislation doesn't state who needs to be on the committee.
For PDEC,
For the exit interview. Like
Um,
who's doing the interview with the teacher?
it doesn't specify who does the interview with the teacher, or it could simply be a survey that the teacher fills out. So it doesn't even have to necessarily be an interview.
That's confusing, right? Because it's called an interview.
Yeah, survey. Yeah, it's a survey / interview, right?
Because I'm wondering if it is the elected board member or the district, and if it's administration at the district, does that pose an issue of people feeling intimidated, to be honest?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I wouldn't suggest the board do it. I would suggest that it's done by, it could be done by perhaps a counselor. It could be done by someone who.
The union president?
Yeah,
The teacher
again,
union?
well, I think you have to be, to your point, I think you would just need to be careful that
I know, that's why I'm trying to understand who, like, because if you create a policy, you're probably going to decide who is on the committee in the policy. And if it's a survey, that's another issue of who gets to read it, and will that person be honest, right?
yeah, I guess from one perspective would be, because my concern was the other side of it, that a teacher who is leaving voluntarily, at that point could just say, I'll fill out the survey that the principal was awful, was an awful human being, should never be a principal. I mean, what does that teacher really have if that teacher is leaving the district? If that teacher's going to a different district, he or she might want to be careful, what she says in that interview. But if a teacher is
read it, who gets to read it? I mean, like, that's the other thing. Like, so one person, or it could be a person or a team of people, or it could be a survey, right? It's going to be dependent on if a policy is created or not. And then who gets the results, and do the results link to the person, like by name, or I don't know. It just seems,
yeah, I think
there's a lot of questions.
I think it does. From a board role, the board's role would be, in my view, would be, you'd want to know how many teachers left the district voluntarily. You'd want to know what are their demographics, what racial backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds do they have? And you probably, without getting into really into the grain of or the granular part of it, I think there are things that the board would want to know to think, to help the board in its practice retain its teachers. So there are issues. So as a superintendent, I would want to read those survey results. I would want to report to my board about those survey results, and I'm required to share with the state the attrition rates in my district, in the district as well. So I would look at it as terms of, this is really important information. There are concerns about leadership. I think the board want to know the issues about, if there are issues about leadership, if there are issues about professional development opportunities not being afforded to teachers. There are concerns that teachers don't have leadership opportunities in the district. Those are the kinds of things that I think a board would want to know. Why are we losing? Why did we lose 7 teachers this year? And why did 3 of them leave the profession? Why are teachers of color, whom we're trying to attract and retain, why did we lose out of the 7? Why are 4 of them teachers of color? So that's the level of what the board, I think, would want to know in terms of its decision making.
So wait, just 2 more questions really quickly. Did CABE develop a sample survey?
We did. We did.
And will that be shared?
It's in it's in the exit interview policy. It follows in the appendix.
I can
Okay.
send it to you. I can email it to you if you'd like.
Yeah, can you see Pam here?
That'd be great.
I can email
And
it.
then I know that the policy is required for teachers, or the legislation is required for teachers, and absent a policy, that is the only requirement. But if boards wanted an exit interview for any staff at the school district, would that be appropriate?
Are there people outside of teachers?
Anyone who works for the school district. So like, I understand why we would want to absolutely know why teachers are leaving, but wouldn't it be relevant why anybody was leaving?
Absolutely. I think that'd be great practice. It'd be great practice. What the state is only interested in is teachers.
Right.
But the board can certainly be, again, in my view, should be interested in why anybody's leaving the school district, especially if you're seeing, you know, why can't we retain our paras? Why can't we retain our school, our lunch staff? You know, what those kinds of, that information would certainly help a board. You know, whether it's policy work, whether it's the evaluation of a superintendent, that kind of work, I think would be really critical. That's a great point. And to your point, Pam and I will put our heads together and look at the update, and see if we can be clearer in how we share that with districts. You raised a really good point, and I want to make sure that, you know, that I would be concerned at this point that there are districts that don't get the quarterly updates and don't even know there is an exit policy, and they now have to have one. Not a policy, but they have to have at least the survey interview process.
Well, and the other point was on the financial literacy. So that is a change. That by law, it's no longer required. If I understood, the financial literacy course is no longer
no,
required.
No. The financial I was talking about well, what's the name of that? Hold on here. Yeah, right here. It's the board may adopt the requirement of a 1-credit mastery-based diploma assessment. That's the, a lot of, it was a requirement that boards had to have a 1-credit mastery-based diploma assessment for students to graduate. So that was your culminating project. I'm trying to think of the right word for it, but it was
Capstone project.
capstone.
Capstone.
Thank you, Tina. Capstone project. So that is no longer a requirement. And again, if you go back to the legislation, the legislators were concerned that by adding a 1/2-credit financial literacy course, then they're adding more credits now, mandating more credits for graduation. And so what the legislature did, slyly in my view, is they said, you know what we'll do? We'll now make the capstone project elective or not mandatory, and then actually the boards will have a 1/2 credit less of a mandate, because we're adding the 1/2 credit financial literacy mandate, and we've now taken the 1 credit mandate for a capstone project and now making that voluntary or elective for boards. My concern with that, again, I think with a lot of districts, is as a superintendent, for the past 6 years of my life, I was working with my staff on developing a capstone project because it was a required project. We put many resources, many dollars into that work, time into that work. We created a whole pay scale for mentors to oversee that work. Working with guidance counselors on their contracts and with a union on what their role was going to be with that work. And now I'm being told to get a 1/2 credit financial literacy course that now all that other work I did is now not, it's not no longer a requirement. So a board that will say, you know what, we're not going to require that anymore, just flush down the toilet 60 years of work to get a great program together for kids.
But did they change the financial? I thought they had originally required the course in personal financial
It's
management,
required, it's required.
and now they've changed that.
No, it's a required course.
Okay, did they change where it's applied?
No, it's the same as the legislation. So the half credit can be applied to either humanities or as an elective credit.
Okay, because in the policy that you sent us, it's in red, which means there's a change.
It was a change from the original policy before these changes.
Right. So again, I'm going back to your column. Is this required? No. So I'm interpreting this as there's nothing we need to do with this policy. This is just a recommendation, but we don't have to make any changes in our policy, but we do.
You do, you do.
Is the question
So
policy
again,
or just-
I think you just need to review this because this is kind of causing confusion.
Okay.
Okay.
No, we'll take, thanks. Thank you, Ann, for that. Yep. Any other questions?
One more. Is there sample policy? I know you said CABE created a sample survey. Did they create a sample policy for the exit interview?
Yes, it's policy 4117.6. Right?
Yes,
Thank you.
I'd be happy to send it to you. What district are you from?
Bristol.
Oh, okay. And your last name is?
Pons, Pons.
Okay,
My first name Shelby.
okay, Shelby, thanks.
Thank you.
I'll send that off to you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yep, I've got one more. This is
Sure.
a different policy, though.
Which one?
The policy, I can't find it on my CABE update that you had sent out a while back about the change in the kindergarten entrance requirements with the age. Did you send a sample with that or know what number that was? I looked under, I think 5113 or something under attendance, but
What's
It's
that?
in there. Yes.
It should be in there
It
now.
should be in there. Should be on our website.
okay, under
Do
what
you want
number?
me to send 5113? Do you want me to send it to you, Ian?
That would be great, Pam.
Okay, sure.
So we had our legislative breakfast yesterday for Area 3, and we spent quite a bit of time
I bet.
on the problems that this has caused with different districts. Mainly with people that have a pre-K program. And now you've got 4-year-olds that won't be able to go to kindergarten, but you have other 4-year-olds coming into the program. So you can't just repeat what you did. But my question is, if I understood the way I first read the policy, this is up to the individual districts to come up with their criteria as to whether someone 4 years old could go to kindergarten. Is that right?
Is developmentally ready? Yes, that is correct. It's up to the district to choose the assessment tool to determine that. Yes.
Okay, and then but that's just within the district. So we may come up with something very different from Bristol, but that's okay.
That is it. Whether it in my view, it's not okay in terms of a state policy. But in terms of how this policy was drafted, it's permissible under the legislation. Yes.
So people were talking after the breakfast was over, and they were saying, you know, they're trying to think of balancing the numbers so it doesn't throw everything off. And technically they could say, okay, but if your child was actually going to be 5 by October 1st instead of September 1st, that we may let those kids in just to kind of even out the numbers and say, yeah, we did come up with some criteria, but it was kind of like, how can you make individual decisions on criteria?
You backwards engineer it, right?
Right. And actually, 10 years ago, when they started to try and change this, the original legislation was a 4-year implementation program,
Yeah,
and they could not get that past the legislature.
yeah. and
They
it's
said, no,
4 years.
this was too confusing. And
Right.
yet this is what came out of the breakfast yesterday is, okay, we don't disagree with the law. We're the last state in the country to make September 1st,
Yeah,
but you should have implemented it. So it's
No,
kind of
you're
like
right.
the full circle. 10
Exactly.
years, they couldn't do it. And now we're going to do it all at once, suck it up. And,
Right.
so all right, we'll take a look at that and see what we're
And to
going
your point, Ann, that you can talk to different districts across the state and they have completely different views on how to assess students, whether they talk to the preschool, they get a sense of where these kids are. It could be an observation in a classroom, a preschool classroom. It's and again, a lot of it is coming from the concerns that you're raising around, are we prepared for this? Do we have, we're going to get too many kids one year and not enough kids another year? What's it going to do to our preschool programs in our towns? So there are a lot of concerns, and I think because the state hasn't backed away from its the policy and what the date of this, they're basically saying that districts will have to come up with their own plan, their own assessment plan. Again, you have to follow the policy, developmentally appropriate, but how you determine that is going to be up to towns, up to school districts. And you can make a strong rationale. I mean, there's no test I could think of that's going to determine whether or not a child is developmentally can get a waiver because he or she is developmentally ready for kindergarten. There isn't one assessment I'm aware of.
No.
So you can
Who needs the education the most, right? When you think about it, if they are delayed, wouldn't we want them in school?
Exactly, right. It's a great point.
I think it's
So
a
that-
lawsuit waiting to happen in the sense that you're going to deny someone based on readiness and then they may qualify for services and then you deny them access to school.
And if I were an attorney, the first question I would ask is, how did you determine readiness? And then the next question would be, what research can you share with the court, with the judge, that will give that me comfort that your assessment tool was the be all and end all of making that decision. And
Right.
at that point, I would be sweating buckets.
So is it too late for the legislature to rethink the implementation? Is
I
that-
think our only hope, and no one knows the legislative process better than you, is that you have to hope in this next session that they'll take it up and provide some level of flexibility for transitioning, or
But no, they're not going to do anything that'll affect this September.
I don't see
I
it.
think we've missed that opportunity.
I think so. But again, I will tell you that superintendents and boards across the state have become very creative in how they are dealing with this because they have no other tools available.
Right. Right. Yeah. Hmm. Always something.
So let's see. So policies completed and appearing in the next policy update, which will be much clearer and provide districts and boards with much better information as to what policies need to be updated and which are blah, blah, blah. So here, the increasing, you're going to see in this update, which will come out in the end of February, increasing educated diversity plan. You'll see a staff development policy. You'll see a play-based learning policy, which is new. You'll see the special education policy 6159 is receiving significant updates. So you'll look for that in those updates. Ages of attendance. Again, just some minor updates you'll see in that policy that corresponds with what we were just talking about. Public complaints, I updated that policy 1312 to work together with the library books policy. So so I looked at the public complaints policy, which was out of sync with the updates I made to the library policy. So look for that. Challenging behavior reporting form will be in there as well, and that's here. It's ready to go for you to look at. It doesn't require board adoption. Again, it's just simply a tool that can be used by administrators, and et cetera. And the suicide prevention intervention regulations, with the changes I made to the suicide prevention policy, the regulations are now updated and ready to go that support that. And they also comply with all the legislation out of 2023 legislative session. So that you'll see this update will be coming out at the end of February. As you may be aware, Terry DeMars is retiring. So that was Pam's assistant, Terry. Sometimes when you call the policy office, you may have spoken with Terry. She's been doing this work for
19 years.
19 years.
Mm.
So I call this last policy update will be Terry's last hurrah.
Oh. Are you updating the Title IX compliance one? We had talked about that one.
And going to the next slide, policies under development. I am updating CABE's restorative justice policy. And that will become a mandated policy boards will have to adopt. And I'll give you a model for that. Responsible use technology, cell phones. If you read my journal article that just came out, I share some strong observations regarding concerns I have with cell phones, the addictive nature of it, the mental health issues related to it. I've since had conversations with people who know an awful lot about technology. I'm part of this state technology team, and what I'm looking at at this point, rather than updating or even having a cell phone policy, I'm looking at revising the responsible use policy, because it's not the cell phone that's addictive. It's the applications, it's the social media. We're seeing a lot going on at the federal level. Yesterday's meeting with the various CEOs from these tech firms are under the gun and Congress is under the gun to create reasonable regulations that protect our children from these applications and these social media programs where their business model is to get more eyes and more clicks and really serve to addict our kids so they can't get through a day without it. So look for some work that I do with the responsible use policy that takes into account AI, social media, and those kinds of things to help guide districts to help create guidelines for healthy practice around these technology areas. We don't want to take technology away from kids, but more and more teachers need to help children know how these technologies work, how they operate, how vulnerable children can be, and understand all of that. Title IX, we were promised that in March. They're doing the federal government has promised an update to the Title IX regulations for the almost past year. That they're trying to figure out guidelines. They're trying to determine guidelines around transgender youth and athletics. So they've gotten, when regulations are being changed at the federal level, there's a period of time for public comment. You can understand that the interest in public comment around this topic has been extraordinary, and they've expanded the opportunities for public comment. And I think that they're still trying to reconcile how how Title IX regulations can guide practice around issues around transgender and transgender children and their access to athletics. Whether or not a boy transitioning to a girl would be eligible to be on a girl's team versus a boys team, and those kinds of issues around gender and transgender. So I am working with the commission identified earlier, the commission on equity and children, and it's got a long title. And they're responsible for creating a toolkit, for a Title IX toolkit that districts will have available to use around Title IX regulations. I'm on that committee, and we're going to be developing that toolkit. But as a committee, we're also waiting for these regulations to come out from the feds. But long answer to your question, your concern, Anne, around Title IX is that my next area to tackle will be the Title IX regulations, Title IX policy. So that will receive 90% of my energy over the next 2 months.
Don't you think that whole issue is just going to end up in the Supreme Court?
I think it will end up in the Supreme Court, and already the Supreme Court is taking on some specific cases around that topic.
And where is it has it gone through the Supreme Court in the state of Connecticut with the case from Canton?
I think the entire appeals court, I think it's District 2. I think the entire District 2 court is reviewing that case now. It hasn't made a decision on it, though.
All right, so it still hasn't gone through all the channels, even in Connecticut.
No. It's really, again, it's a really complex issue. And I think my concern is that it's going to come back to CIAC, and it's going to guide their work. And my concern is it will be boards of education will determine which athletic programs can safely accommodate transgender students. And so it's going to be on the local boards to make that determination. And then they'll do something like this. They'll say there'll be certain number or certain percentage of athletic programs you can exclude from transgender participation. And then it's going to be like, oh, so we can only do 10% of those programs or 15% of those programs. So now you're going to have athletic directors trying to figure out, I have a soccer program, I have a football program, I have a lacrosse program. Which of those programs are safe for transgender students? And that's my concern is it's going to come down to that kind of calculation. But I could be wrong. I hope so. Because I don't want to be a superintendent trying to figure that out. And then finally, I'm working on a model emergency action plan for interscholastic and intramural athletic events. We have a policy on that. And some districts have asked us if we had a model plan. And so I'm putting together a model plan. I have a few plans from different districts, and I'm looking to see the best practices from them to give boards a chance to decide which plan works for them. So that is, and then just a sort of a stay tuned foreshadowing. Legislative priorities are always kind of a scary thing to start looking at. I think we're going to see through this 2024 session, which begins on February 7th, we'll see continuing concerns around children's mental health services. We'll see more around teacher certification, recruitment, and retention. And we'll also see some more guidelines coming out from the federal government that the state will either adopt or create their own. and I think we'll see more around artificial intelligence. As I was looking at the General Assembly website and and some legislative writings over the past couple of weeks, it looks like some of these policies are really going to be directly related to state government and the private sector. But I think we all know that when we start seeing things come down in those areas, we'll probably receive some of the backsplash on that as well, in my guess. So, wow, we hardly have time for best practices, problems of practice, and ideas for future policies and policy services. But I'm here as long as you want to be. So if you'd like to, if any of these 3 areas interest you, I don't want to keep you longer than the hour that you gave to this pursuit.
I have questions if you're staying, I would like to ask.
I'm totally staying as long as you need.
Is this did this happen every month?
This happens quarterly.
Quarterly, okay.
But I also want you to know that you can call me anytime. If something happens, I don't just answer the phone once every 4 months.
And your name is Robin?
No, that's my brother's
Oh.
name.
Oh, okay.
You know my brother?
I don't know her brother, no.
Yeah, Jody, Jody.
Jody.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you,
And
Jody.
how do we contact you, Jody?
Welcome, Ethel. You can contact me, JGOELER at CABE.org. So that's JGOELER at CABE.org. And my phone number at CABE,
860-571-7446 is our phone number.
Okay, that's great.
And somebody always answers the phone, no automated stuff.
no, call
Okay.
anytime.
Okay.
Anytime there's a question, you have a policy meeting coming up tonight, you want to get something clear, anything, just give a call.
Yeah, I have a couple questions but I don't want to jump first if anybody has some that they wanted, because I know I already asked them. So if anyone wants to go before me, they can.
Well, I think we lost a couple already. I think Ethel's deciding if she wants to stay on or not.
I have all.
But ask away.
Okay, so one of my questions was around the Menstrual Equity Act and the legislation, and I know that there's been an amendment to it. Did CABE do any kind of policy sample for that?
We did not, because we were told they were putting that off for a year. So we're waiting to see what the 2024 session provides.
Okay, and then this is a question that's kind of not attached to any legislation, but one of the ways that school districts sometimes pay after school staff is through stipends. And beyond being on the board, I actually work for the state. So it led me to thinking about, the question was posed because a school district was paying student interns based on a grant minimum wage, at least minimum wage was the language associated to the grant. And the question came up, do we have to pay teachers at least minimum wage in the after school program? And I never thought we would need policy that outlined a minimum wage for people working in programs. And that led to me understanding that in some cases, people are given a stipend to serve in a role after school for the year that would never even come close to equaling minimum wage per hour. And I was trying to understand how that's legal.
I'm not an attorney, so I can't answer the legal part of it, but I was a superintendent. I have the wounds to prove it. And what I would say is that when it comes to teachers and certified and non-certified staff, look at your contracts. The contract will typically specify what the hourly rate would be for a teacher, or if there are clubs, there are approved clubs and after-school programs, there are typically salaries that go along with that as well. So I would stay away from any conversation around paying teachers or staff minimum wage for stipended kinds of positions.
Proponent of paying them less than what their union contract would be, but when you provide a stipend and it doesn't equal the union, it doesn't even equal minimum wage. That's the part that I'm trying to understand.
Again, I would
The contract.
yeah, the contract, but I would also say that this is something that should be discussed with the superintendent and the teachers union to come up with some plan, whether it's done through formal bargaining process or it's something that can happen with board approval if outside the bargaining process. You know, but this is something I wouldn't touch this without the teachers union, without it being discussed as a topic. This is a topic of bargaining and discuss it that way.
Was your brain more so from a statewide perspective than an individual district? Like just something that, kind of it was kind of a cognitive dissonance moment for me in my brain of like, wait a minute, I don't understand this. I don't understand how we can stipend pay if it doesn't equal minimum wage. And I just didn't know if there was some sort of policies around stipend that I was missing, but I searched the CABE website and with the word stipend and nothing. So
Yeah, you won't see it in a policy, but you'll see that again. It's contract, it's also labor. This is something that this is really, to me, would rise to the level. If there are things you want covered by teachers or stipended to provide stipends, you really want to engage in a conversation with your teachers union around that.
I think I'm saying the opposite. I don't necessarily want stipends. I just know they exist. And so I was just curious around the law, but I understand your answer.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, of course. And any other questions?
Can I ask one, Jody? How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. Can you tell me again what the PDEC stands for? Is that a standing group or is it only put together when it's time for evaluations?
It's a great question. It's a standing group and it stands for Professional Development Evaluation Committee.
Okay.
So that's the committee in your district that is putting together the professional development plan and is also going to be responsible for creating an observation model for the evaluation educator leader evaluation evaluation and support plan. So they're very, very important group.
Okay, yeah, I just had never heard of that. I guess we have one, or I know we'll have one at some point. I'll just check with the superintendent. I'm sure there's one.
It'll give you something to talk about.
Oh, right. And the other thing was, I am interested in ideas for future policies and policies services, mostly future policies. You have something in mind?
No, I was really kind of asking you guys if there are things are there things that you're facing or that you're dealing with where you think there's a policy need that I should be aware of?
I can't think so. Right now, we're in the midst of revising a lot of policies, but a lot of it is coming from the state and through our attorneys. They're kind of helping us with it.
Yeah. But if you in the process, if you think of anything, just let me know.
Okay. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Well, in Bristol, we always have a lot of policies that take a very long time to develop, month after month after month. The two right now that are in the process is recess. A lot of conversation about CABE's model policy and then what we currently have in the district. And it's interesting because it's a very, very heated topic for a lot of people, taking away recess from kids, especially kids who need to have output for self-regulation, right? And lot of pushback we get for trying to align to your policy. They believe their policy is better than your policy. And so it's a
Who thinks their policy is better than our?
Bristol Public Schools thinks their policy is better than the CABE policy. You can watch our 10 plus meetings that debate the crap out of that.
What's the hang up with CABE's policy with that? What causes the most?
We think your okay, so the board, I think some members of the board believe that your policy protects children more than Bristol Public Schools policy. So, and there's not an agreement on that, and so it has gone a long way. The other is we have a unique situation where we have a old school building that was restored and brought back to life, but partially owned by the city and has an old theater in it that is run by the city on certain days, and the school has access to it on other days. And the people who, and it's a magnet, or it's a school now for the arts, but only for Bristol Public School kids. And they want to, on the days the city owns it and brings in like performances, big off-Broadway performances and things, they want to be able to serve alcohol. And it's in conflict with no alcohol on school grounds. However, there is a lot of precedence of schools when school is not in session, if they have outside vendors and it's not associated with the school and it's like a theater that's ours, right? Having that ability. So we had to have city council change a charter, and the lawyers are drafting up language to help us, but it's a very controversial kind of issue as well in our town.
The only thing I'll say about, I can see that will take up a lot of meetings.
It has.
What I would just, my only caution around the recess policy is before you change it, just make sure that what your changes are compliant with the state legislation. Because the legislature.
Every meeting is state legislation, our policy, and your policy.
Oh, okay, all right.
And it's going back and forth. And I don't understand why there's resistance to change, but I know there is,
Yeah, I didn't draft the recess policy. It's been on in our bank for a while, but it's based on, when I looked at it, I saw that it was based if not completely on the state regs around.
Very close. It's very close.
Yeah.
It's definitely more aligned than ours.
Yeah, the legislature, their view is, and you see that with the play, the play, play to learn policy, and the legislation around that is really guided around kids need time outside to play, and educators can use withholding that opportunity as punishment. So if you continue to act this way, you're not going to be able to go to recess. There are other things you could do to punish kids or to restoratively address kids through restorative practices, whatever. But withholding recess, just as an educator, not allowing kids to go outside and play just simply creates worse behavior, which then gets further into the negative spin cycle around, okay, now we're gonna do in-school suspension for the kid. Now we're gonna suspend the kid. Now we're gonna expel the kid, and you just end up going down bad. And all the legislation coming out, all the direction of the Connecticut General Assembly is moving away from the school to prison pipeline and all that kind of punishment, and going back now into restorative practices and giving kids time for recess, learning through play. And so the state's moving in that direction.
I agree 100%. So we're getting there. We're getting there. Lots of meetings.
Keep fighting the good fight.
Fighting the good fight. Yeah. Well, thank you, Jody. I really appreciate your time, and I already saved you in my phone under Jody CABE. So if you see
Whoa.
Shelby, you're gonna know. I'm gonna call you.
Shelby, anytime. I look forward to it.
Thank you.
All right, thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thank you, everyone.